Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Shelby and this is Shelby Reads, and today we're doing my 2025 yearly reading wrap up. Oh my god! These are all the physical books I have. We will go over them. You might see multiple me's popping out because there's 104 books to go through, so it's taking me a little bit of time, but I'm having a good time. If you're new to my channel, my name is Shelby. This is Shelby Reads, and we talk about sapphic books all day, every day. Sometimes accidentally we sprinkle in some other LGBT books in there, but it's usually when the author lies to us. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you want to hear more about sapphic books. My goal for this year was 100 books, and to get to 104 is really special to me. I worked really hard. Please keep in mind that I also read a lot of ebooks, and that some of the physical books I sold back to thrift books because I wanted more books, first of all, and I usually pick ones I either know I'm not going to read, I really didn't like, or both, and then I send them. So I don't have all of them, but I will pop up little things, okay? Okay. Also, if there's a problematic author in here, it's either that I didn't know or I thrifted it, and I will explain when we get there, okay? Hope that's acceptable to everybody. And let's get started. So in January, the first book I read for 2025 was The Essential Dykes to Watch Out For by Alison Bechdel. This was a graphic novel. I'm pretty sure it was a bunch of her comic strips just kind of shoved into one book, but it was all about the same characters. I did like it fine enough. The only critique I can really think of is that it was very long and it was very difficult to get through. Next, I read The Tethered Page by Melissa Caruso. This is the first book of a trilogy. I really didn't like the first book, and number one, everyone in the world is like basically bisexual, which is fine, but I hated the first man love interest, Marcello. I hated him and he was useless, and I was really hoping that it would go the sapphic route of being between Amalia and Zyra, but it never did, which is honestly probably good for Zyra because Amalia is kind of annoying in a lot of places, and Zyra ends up with another woman anyway. Hooray. Next, I read Hijab Butch Blues by Lamia H. This is a nonfiction memoir specifically about an immigrant who has come to America who is Muslim and butch and also hijabi, and it has a lot of really interesting things about religion. Islam is a religion I don't know a ton of information about, so it was super interesting. And I do kind of like books where I have to stop and Google things to see like, what does this mean? I actually find that entertaining. I know some other people don't like it, but I personally do. Next, I read Into the Midnight Void by Mara Fitzgerald. This is the second in the Beyond the Ruby Veil duology. I loved the first one, and this one was definitely not disappointing in the slightest. The main characters in this duology are so incredibly evil, but in a way that only teenagers can be. And I think that the main character and Ianthe Tridentarius from The Locked Tomb would either be besties or they would obliterate one another because there can only be one. That's how I feel about this. These books are nasty and a really interesting fantasy, and I really enjoyed them. I highly recommend. Next, I read Cottonmouths by Kelly J. Ford. This was a contemporary fiction. The main character goes back to her hometown and she gets back into this girl she was really into in high school, but through a bunch of shenanigans, it basically turns into Breaking Bad. I really liked this book. I thought it was very interesting and poignant and talked a lot about one-sided relationships and kind of like manipulation. Also, I thought it was really good. I had a good time. Next, I read Love Out of Bounds by Ellie Spark. I think I read a couple by her on this list. Yeah, I did. I read multiple. So this one is about one of them living a double life as an escort because she has a huge amount of debt, and it's a very short book. It's a novella, so it's 123 pages. I just don't think Ellie Spark is for me, and I think that's fine. If you guys enjoy her, good for you, but she's not for me. The next one was also by her, which I rated slightly higher, which was Love for Hire by Ellie Spark, and this one was more like two broken-hearted women who were having a lot of problems trying to, you know, make it work. I gave the one before this 1.75 and I give this one 2.25, so not a huge improvement, but I still liked it fine. Next, I read Honeybloods by I.S. Bell. This is also a novella, but it's almost 200 pages and it's an adult, no, it's a young adult horror. I didn't know it was young adult. This might be like romance, and it's a vampire book. I actually heavily enjoyed this one, and there are 2 more books in the series, so I will probably end up doing it. I think if you really love Jennifer's Body like I do, you will end up liking that book. Then I read Outlaw Marriages: The Hidden Histories of 15 Extraordinary Same-Sex Couples by Roger Straightmatter. This was nonfiction, and it was about a bunch of same-sex couples who lived together basically as husband and husband or wife and wife back in the day, which just shows that queerness has always been around. I especially loved learning about Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas, and I am excited to read their actual works because I really liked reading about them. Next, I read Strength Check by Catherine McIntyre. This was a contemporary romance that was supposed to be focused on like board games and D&D. I don't feel like it was that focused on that, unfortunately. It is a series. I probably won't continue it. I'm actually going to be doing a rant review about it at some point. I know that I read it early last year, but I hadn't really started my channel yet, so I am gonna go revisit it, but I think that it's not the best romance that I've ever read. I think it's pretty boring, and there's a lot of repetitiveness that I didn't enjoy. Next, I read Princess Ever After by Kay O'Neill. This was a middle grade fantasy graphic novel. I thought it was really cute. It's middle grade, you know, like I liked it well enough, but I'm obviously not the target audience, so. But with that being said, I did still really enjoy this book. Next, I read A Bond Me for Two by Trinity Nguyen. This is a YA contemporary romance. This one was so sweet and cute, and I really liked a lot of the talk about colonization and feeling really detached from your family's home country. I thought this was a really great debut, and I hope she keeps writing because I really liked it, and I also think the cute little edges are really nice. This one's pretty short, so I would highly recommend this one. The first book I read in March was Moby Dyke, An Obsessive Quest to Hunt Down the Last Remaining Lesbian Bars in America by Krista Burton. This is a travel memoir. It's nonfiction. I don't hate the idea of this book. I hate the execution for sure. I found it so incredibly boring. It meandered for a long time, and it wasn't for me. I really wanted to know even more about like the bars and the lesbian scene. If there were more books about this topic, I think I wouldn't care so much. You know what I mean? Like, made me feel weird. The next book I read was Margot Zimmerman Gets the Girl by Brianna Arshram and Sarah Waxelbaum. This is a young adult contemporary romance. I actually really liked this book. I thought the ADHD and autism rep were really good. I had a really great time while I was actually reading it. I would recommend that one to you guys, definitely. The next one I read was The Defiant Heir by Melissa Caruso. It is the second book in the Swords and Fire duology. I rated this quite a bit higher because the other man love interest was so cool. He's like the Crow Lord. He is saucy and interesting and like wonderful, and he has his own agenda, and I really liked him a lot, to the point where I was pretending he was a he, him butch because I wanted to just get through this. But I enjoyed him very heavily. I thought he was a much better character than Marcello, and I was literally on the edge of my seat wondering which one of them she was going to end up with. I was going to start my rant channel actually back in March when I was reading these, because I was like, if she ends up with that other guy, I'm gonna lose it. The next book I read in March was The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This is an oldie. I've never read it though. I loved it. Now, is this book like very deeply upsetting? Yeah, it really is. It's so incredibly upsetting. However, I really loved every minute of it. I thought that it was really well done. Some parts were really hard as like a survivor of certain things to like actually read, but I still highly recommend this book. I think you should just check the trigger warnings and see where your mental health is at while you're reading it, but I think it's a really essential queer read. The next book I read in March was It's Not My Favorite by Rue. It's #1 in the Lake Effect series. This was my first ever rant review. This is the worst book I've ever read, period. There's nothing worse than this one that I've read so far. Obviously, someday maybe something will come along and dethrone it, but right now, this is the worst LGBT book I have ever read in my life. After that, I finally finished the Swords and Fire trilogy by reading The Unbound Empire by Melissa Caruso. All I have to say is that Amalia made the right decision, and I liked what ended up happening with Marcello's character because I had been hating him the entire time. So, also the queer girls who end up with each other, Zyra and her girlfriend, they're all good. So it does have a decent ending for being a fantasy trilogy. Next, I read Wrestling with God and Man, Homosexuality in the Jewish Tradition. And this is by Rabbi Stephen Greenberg. This came out in the 90s. I have the updated version. If you're interested in theology in any way, this would be a really interesting read for you. There's a lot of stuff about homosexuality for men in the Jewish tradition, but also how women aren't really mentioned, which happens in a lot of cultures I've noticed. I think if you're Jewish and you really want to learn about some theological arguments, I think that this could be a really good resource. The rabbi is Orthodox Jewish, so that might change your opinion depending. I've wanted to convert to Judaism for a long time. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to, just because I find me and most religions, there are some real sticking points. There's some really real things that I can't get behind in almost every religion, so we'll see. I don't know. Next, I read Not in the Plan by Dana Hawkins. This is a contemporary romance, and it is the first in the Single in Seattle series. I got this on ebook, and I actually didn't have like high high hopes because some of the books I get on these lists are just awful, but I actually loved this book. It was so cute, it was so good. I thought it had really great anxiety rep. Really enjoyed the entire thing. I like that they had their own problems separate from just the romance. I'm excited to read more Dana Hawkins in the future, honestly. Next, I read At Her Service by Amy Spalding. This was the Out in Hollywood #2, and it has to do with someone who works in the Hollywood area as like an assistant and this bartender that she has a huge crush on. I actually really like this one too. I bought more in this series. I gave this one a 4, so I didn't love it as much as Not in the Plan, but I really love that all of these seem to focus on butches. Like there's a lot of butches in Amy Spalding's books, and I'm really excited about that, so very little to complain about. Next, I read The Siren, the Song, and the Spy by Maggie Takuta Hall. It is the second one in The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea. It's a young adult fantasy. I really enjoyed this one, even more I think in a lot of ways than the first one I read, even though the first one was really great and I think has like arguable butch/trans rep in it. If you like YA and you like fantasy, I think you'll have a good time with this one. Now we're in April, and the first book I read was The Last Girl Standing by Jennifer Dugan. This is a young adult thriller. It has to do with 2 girls who survived this camp massacre, having to go back and try to deal with having PTSD in reality. But the main character starts to think that some things about the whole massacre aren't adding up, and she thinks her girlfriend might have something to do with it. I really liked this, and I really didn't know where this was going to go. I thought there was an interesting descent into madness, so I rated it pretty highly. It was pretty good. The next book I read was Never Trust a Gemini by Freya Nicole Wolf. It felt very middle grade to me despite being a YA contemporary romance. There was a lot about bullying, but I didn't necessarily love how all of that got resolved. I gave it about a 3. It wasn't for me. This kind of goes for the next one as well, Love Under Glass by Christina Meister. This one was about a young lesbian who is in a horrible family who's very much pressuring her into doing things she doesn't want to do. It's in the South, and she decides to run away to her friend in Chicago, but the girl that she was into back home goes after her. I felt like this book just like undercooked a lot of elements way too much, and the practically like insta love of the character who's going off after her was not for me. I really didn't enjoy it. It's about a 3 also. Next, I read Fitting In by Amanda Radley. This was an adult contemporary romance between an autistic adult who got this job at a shopping center in the UK because her dad is now like part owner of the shopping center, and the lady who's like the general manager of the entire shopping center. This book was surprisingly sweet and adorable, and the love story was really nice, and they both had like their own problems, but they were able to work through some of them together. And I love that the main character, who is the manager, didn't just give up on the love interest because she's like, everyone says she's rude, why is she acting this way? She actually wanted to know why she was acting that way, and I think that really helped a lot of things. I really loved it. Next, I read Guava Flavored Lies by J.J. Arias, which is an adult contemporary romance also. This one is about 2 Cuban American bakers who are at odds because their families have had this feud, and their great-great-grandparents like accused the other of stealing recipes from Cuba. They almost had a thing when they were in school together, but now that they're adults, they're really kind of going head to head, and I really enjoyed this book despite the cover being one of the most ugly things you've ever seen. I highly enjoyed this book. I thought it was really good. Next, I read Penny for Your Heart by Susan Vining. This is one of my worst books of the year. I have a whole rant review on that one if you want to see it. It's just terrible. I hate Susan Vining. She's my Colleen Hoover at this point, and I just can't do it. The romance is terrible. The characters are all annoying. They're so millennial cringe, except it was written by Gen X, so it's even worse. Hated them. Hated it. Gave it a 1 star. Next, I read The Third Daughter by Adrienne Tooley. This is part of a duology. This one was so interesting. It is a YA fantasy, and there's so much like religious stuff, but also magic, and this one girl's depression kind of creates magical tears, and the other girl is trying to get the throne, even though it's supposed to go to her sister because it's supposed to go to the third daughter. But she knows that if it goes to her sister, it will not go well because the third daughter is controlled by her religious dad, who is not the same dad as her dad. This is such like a rich fantasy, and this is probably my favorite Adrienne Tooley book that I've read so far, so I would highly recommend you guys read this one. Again, if you like fantasy, if you like YA, this one. Next, I read The London Society by Sarah Penner. This was an adult, I don't know if you'd say like mystery or thriller, or historical fantasy. I also think there's a little bit of a thriller element to it. It really reminded me of Affinity by Sarah Waters. I did end up having a good time, but I could see how this one would be a hard one to get into, considering like it's a very much a historical piece about like the seance societies and blah blah blah. But it has a fun sapphic romance, and I thought it was pretty good in the end, and men are literally always the problem, so I really enjoyed this book. Next was Squad by Maggie Takuta Hall. This is a graphic novel. It's about werewolves, and it's YA. I really enjoyed this. I will say I've noticed that I am less critical of graphic novels, and I do want to kind of become more critical of graphic novels. So if you ever see me rating a graphic novel 5, it's probably because I'm not being that critical of them, but I just really enjoyed them. So I don't know. I had a good time. I thought it was fun. Thought it was like Mean Girls but with werewolves. And the last book for April was An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. This was a Carmilla retelling that takes place in the 60s at an all-girls college. I really enjoyed this book, and I was really excited because I hated S.T. Gibson's Dowry of Blood. And I think it's because I also find Dracula so deeply boring, and I feel Carmilla is, in my opinion, the greatest classic ever written. And I hate that Dracula took a lot of inspiration, but that's the one everyone knows about, even though it's very long-winded in my opinion. I love this book. It was really good. I had very few notes on it. I did think the grooming storyline should have been kind of touched upon a little bit better and more, but I can't complain too much. It was still really good. The first book I read for May was Sorry Bro by Talene Vascuni. It was an adult contemporary romance. This one was very rooted in Armenian American culture, and I actually really love books that I have to stop and look things up for, so I had like a really great time with this one, and I thought the romance was cute and sweet, and I really enjoyed it. Next, I read The Fox and the Flame by Cassandra Flamori. This was a young adult fantasy book. This one I had minimal complaints about pacing, and I was also worried that the author was never going to kill any of her darlings, but she proved me wrong, and she came in clutch towards the end, so I really appreciated that. This book is very misogyny heavy though, so if you're tired of that, or you find that very triggering, we spend a lot of time with some deeply misogynistic characters, and it is kind of exhausting after a while, I can't lie to you. Next, I read The Queen of Coin and Whisper by Helen Cochran. This is a YA fantasy as well. This one I felt did court intrigue so well. I was so deeply interested that I ran and bought the second one immediately. However, I learned that the second one is only kind of barely connected to this, and I was like, oh. But anyway, the romance is between a queen who is very young and has been thrust into this position, and this girl that she makes her spy. It is so good. Can't even tell you. I loved it. I adored every minute. Next, I read Godslayers by Zoe Hana Mikuta. This was the second book in the, I think it's the Gear, I don't know if it's called the Gear Breakers duology, but the first book is Gear Breakers. This is a heavy sci-fi dystopian. It's YA, but I feel like it dealt with a lot of really heavy, interesting topics, such as like classism and people who are like robots, sort of, but also not. It was really good, and they're like giant mechas, so if you really loved like Gundam growing up, which I did, but actually my weird anime brag, I loved The Vision of Escaflowne very much. That one is also a cool mech like anime if you guys are interested. However, this one is very sapphic, and the cover is just like gorgeous. My camera never wants to focus on anything that's not me for some reason. I'll figure it out someday. I will say, because I had spent so much time between the first and the second one, because I don't think the second one was out when I read the first one, it was a bit hard to jump back into, so I would recommend reading them back to back. However, this book is still really good, and if you guys have read it, I pictured the Zenith as the collector from the Owl House the entire time. Next, I read Behind the Scenes by Corellia Stetz Waters. This is a contemporary romance. I liked this book a lot, despite there being a lot of millennial cringe. I felt like it was still not as bad as a lot of the other books on this list that had severe millennial cringe. I also really liked that one of the main characters had pelvic trauma that caused sex to be kind of difficult, and they had to figure it out together. I really liked this book, and I thought it was pretty cute overall, even if some of the stuff I was like, oh, that's older millennial for sure. But I still liked it well enough, alright? I know that this one on Sapphic Book Talk I feel is a little controversial, like you either love it or you hate it. I didn't think think it was perfect, but I still had a good time. Next, I read The Ruthless Lady's Guide to Wizardry by C.M. Wagner. This was an adult fantasy. I thought that this book was really fun, and I really loved the sapphic romance. I loved that there was necromancy in it, although it is done by the villain, which is kind of sad. You guys know I love necromancy. It's like my favorite thing. I was gonna include Nona in this list because it's the last book I'm reading for 2025, but I don't think I'm gonna make it, you know, because it's so long and I'm actually like marking things off this time. So I was like 104 is good enough to call it, all right? I really did like that book though. I thought it was really cute. I would recommend you guys reading it, even though necromancy is the villain again. Next, I read One Last Breath by Jilly Myers-Sane. This was a young adult thriller. This one kind of lost me because I liked some of the idea of the main characters being connected to these girls who had been killed like decades before. But then it lost me with spoilers like reincarnation crap. And I was like, oh, that's kind of stupid. Also, I remember finding out who the murderer was and I wasn't surprised. And I was like, oh, great. Also, for a book that is supposed to kind of be a slasher and have like a lot of murder, there really wasn't much. So it was kind of a dull read. I gave it about a 3. Could have been a lot better, in my opinion. It had some real stuff going on there, but then it just kind of gave up. Next, I read The Incandescent by Emily Tesh. This came out this year, and I read it with my book club. I liked it a lot better than other people, so it's a dark academia book for sure, where this professor is at this magic school, and she's teaching invocations and like how to summon demons. However, I felt like there was a lot of plot holes as to why you would even want to do that, and I know that it was very academic, so it's kind of like, well, you do it in academia because people in academia do dumb shit or whatever, but at the same time I'm like, I don't think I would be messing around with this stuff, and I don't think I would be teaching teenagers how to do this. Like, I don't think I would be doing that personally. To each their own, I guess. The Butch is also kind of a cop, but not really. She's like a magical cop. She doesn't work for like the actual pigs, but like it's still kind of very iffy because Butch is very much like rooted in class solidarity and cops are class traitors, so it's kind of like but at the same time, like, do demons have rights in this universe? No. So like, it's what it is, you know? It gained like at least a 1.5 stars from me because the Butch was hot and I thought the Butch wasn't gonna come back, and she did. So most of my book club hated it, just so you know, like, and I understand why, but I didn't hate it as much as them. Next, I read The Persistent Desire, a Butch Femme Reader, which is edited together by Joe Nestle. I'm going to leave a link for that in the description box below because it is free if you want it. So I really, really want people to be able to have it. It's like an ebook. Obviously, it's like a PDF. It's not the actual book. The actual book can be like $300+. I want one, but I'm not made of money. So this book made me cry, and I hadn't cried at a book in a long time. It feels really nice to be seen as a femme person who's into butches, and I really loved all the stories and then also all like the kind of think pieces. I really enjoyed this. I have another book by Joe Nestle that I'm going to read, and I am excited about it. I just think it's nice every time butch femme kind of makes a resurgence, and then there's a lot of things you can like look at, and there was definitely like this big resurgence in the 90s, you know? I really enjoyed it. It meant a lot to me, and I'm really glad I read it. And last for May, I read Passions Between Women, British Lesbian Culture from 1668 to 1801 by Emma Donoghue. I have read one of Emma Donoghue's fiction books before, and it wasn't exactly for me, but I did enjoy it, and it's one of the first lesbian books I bought. It's called Life Mask. I still have it just for like sentimentality. I probably am not gonna read it for a long time if I decide to read it again, but it's neither here nor there. This was so interesting because I feel like this was a direct takedown of Surpassing the Love of Men. It's like a romantic friendship book by Lillian Faderman that had come out in the 80s, and this is talking a lot about how lesbians were actually criminalized, because I feel like a lot of people think they never were. There was a lot of criminalizing of lesbians if you used any kind of phallic object or if you cross-dressed or pretended to be a man. That's when things got really kind of icky. And also, even in romantic friendships, people did care, but they just didn't really do anything about it. A lot of people wrote private letters to one another, like shit talking, like the ladies of Llangollen, for example. So while it didn't necessarily have a tangible effect on them that we can see, that doesn't mean that people were okay with it completely. I really like Emma Donoghue's academic writing. I felt like it was a lot less dry than some of the other ones I've read, and I think it does put a lot of things into context if you want to learn more about lesbian history history, specifically British lesbian history. I really enjoyed this book. Highly recommend. It's not that long. It's only like 300 pages, I think. Oh, it's even less than that. It's like 200 something because there's like a lot of, you know, there's like a works cited thing that goes on for like pages and pages. Starting off strong for Pride Month was Tris 6 Venom by Penelope Douglas. I bought this on purpose because people had told me about it, and I also know that Penelope Douglas sucks. But it was one of my first Reddit reviews. It was my third one, I think. And oh, this book is so bad. It's almost the worst book I read this year, but just like barely not. There are teenagers abusing each other. They're barely legal when they start doing deeply sexual things. The characters feel like they do complete personality transplants once they've decided they want to be together. It's supposed to be like bully romance, but I mean, I guess it is, but it's awful. It's literally horrifying. It's not well written, and it's almost 600 pages. No, I'm sorry, this edition is like 500. I think I'm confusing it with something else. But it's still 500 pages of this mess, and it was so bad. And I know that some lesbians on BookTok and BookTube really like it, but I can't figure out why. I find it like so deeply disconcerting, and I feel like maybe if they were older, it could have been better, but at the same time, I still feel weird about it. Also, I'm never going to be supportive of a book where they act like penetration is the only sex that exists and anything else that happens isn't. If you're queer and you're still writing shit like that, you really need to take a long, hard look in the mirror, okay? It's really weird that you are hung up on penetration being the only kind of real sex when that's just not the case. These two had sex like multiple times before they had penetrative sex, but guess what? Penelope only counted the penetrative sex. So, well, I can't tell if she really counted the rub-a-dub-dubbin. But like, it wasn't cool with me. Nothing about this book is good. And also none of the stakes matter by the end. It's so fucking stupid. So stupid. It also has this trope of all homophobic people are secretly gay, and that kind of just puts the onus of gay people's oppression on ourselves. Like, oh, it's you guys doing it, not the straight people. No, that's not how that works. Sure, some people might be deeply in the closet or whatever, but that is not the truth for most shit that's going on, okay? We do not create our own oppression, and it's stupid to pretend we do. Penelope is never gonna do better. I know that, but like still, what the fuck? Next, I read Burn Our Bodies Down by Rory Power. Now, I did not know about the Rory Power controversy when I first bought this book, so I had been brand new on BookTok when I bought Wilder Girls, her other book, and then this one I picked up not long after that because I had read it and I liked it, and it was on the clearance section at BAM. And then I found out that she was in that super racist group chat and was enabling people to be super racist. Yay! I didn't rate this one because no matter how good I think Rory Power's writing may or may not be, she sucks. So I'm not gonna recommend this to people because it's not fair to do that. So steer clear of Rory Power. If you're really interested, maybe go on Thrift Books or something, but just don't advertise it. It's better to just kind of let these people fade off into the background. Next, I read Queerly Beloved by Susie Dumont. This was a contemporary romance. It didn't really feel contemporary to me because it took place during the time I came out, so like 2013. So it very much felt like a period piece. And it also took place in Oklahoma, which I'm not super familiar with. I just know it's a homophobic place and it's 50th in education. But I really did enjoy that this book not only had a butch, but also that the main character had her own things going on and it wasn't 100% centered around the romance. I know that a lot of people only want romance books to only tackle the romance part and to leave most of the other stuff off, but I personally preferred that the relationship overall wasn't the conflict of the story. I really did like that part. It definitely wasn't my favorite romance of the year, but it was still really good. Next, I read Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is an adult fantasy. This one is so good. It was very like Medici Italy era to me, and I really liked that her plans were never working well and she had to kind of think on the fly a lot. I kind of like the ragtag group we had that ended up joining together to try and fix things, and I really liked the metal magic and the start of the sapphic romance that's probably going to take place in the next one. I can't wait to read the next ones. This one was really good. Definitely a 5-star. See, I'm normally pretty good at picking out books for myself. I just do some terrible ones sometimes. Next, I read Bitter Winds by Marina Tempest. This was a novella, a historical romance, except there's nothing historical about it. It didn't really understand what misogyny was like in this time period. And if you want to break away from that, that's fine, but like I think we should maybe add some kind of like fantasy or like this is slightly not earth-ass element to that. I didn't enjoy this one. I thought that it was not only pretty predictable, but it was just like boring to me. It was really, really boring to me. And I felt like the romance was almost non-existent for something that's supposed to be a romance. But it's neither here nor there. Next, I read Those Beyond the Wall by Micaiah Johnson. This is the second book in the Space Between Worlds series. I liked this one a lot because it delved into a lot more of, I would say, the huge class disparity and kind of the poorer side of this dystopian. Was it my favorite of the two? No, certainly not, no. But I still gave it a 4. I really enjoyed it. I just think without the main sapphic romance, which was one of the draws of the first one, but also like, even though the world was terrible, it really made you root for them. I felt like without that, it kind of fell a bit flat for me. But again, Micaiah Johnson is a very good writer, so there's no way that like people would hate it, I don't think, but it's certainly not my favorite of the two of them. Next, I read The Never Tilting World by Rin Chupeco. This is a YA fantasy. This book could have really been something. I could have really enjoyed it. However, there were a bunch of anachronisms that I noticed like immediately. It was very upsetting to my brain. I didn't even mind that 2 of the POVs are straight people who were like into each other. It was fine, it was whatever. But the anachronisms and the kind of like world building threw me off. I gave this like a 3.5. I hope the next one is better, but I'm not sure how that will go. I didn't hate it, I didn't love it. Definitely could have been a lot better. And last for June, I read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. It is a historical romance. I hate this book. I gave it a higher rating initially, I think because I was a little scared that people would like come at me, but then once I realized no one gives a shit what I say, I was like, no, it's a 2 for sure. I think that Taylor Jenkins Reid does not know how to write romance well, in my opinion. It felt like they were helping each other a little bit, and then suddenly, because Evelyn found out Celia's a lesbian, she's suddenly in love. I hated that. I hated how Celia is kind of infantilized almost, being like, no, you can't be out because X, Y, and Z, when she's the lesbian and she's the one who would face the real repercussions, which is something Evelyn said herself. She said it herself. Like, it pisses me off. There's so much lesbophobia. The race issues are done extremely poorly. I didn't find much in this book that I enjoyed personally, and I don't really understand why it's at like the pinnacle of lesbian books or whatever for BookTok, because I don't think it's that well written. I don't think it's that well constructed, and it uses the barrier gaze trope on every single gay character. Every single one. So like, not interested, not for me. Also, I know she's a Zionist. I thrifted that one. I pinky promise I thrifted it from Goodwill, okay? The first book I read in July is The Final Strife by Sarah L. O'Reefy. This is an adult fantasy. This book was so good. I like ran through it so fast. It's a big book. It's almost 600 pages, and I did it in like 3 days because I couldn't put it down. It was so good. There's like really interesting blood magic. There's kind of like this switched at birth situation, and there's kind of an enemies to lovers arc that I really appreciate. And there are also other characters that get POVs who, one of the characters is trans and is part of this very specific group that has like their hands and tongues cut out or off, and basically they have to communicate in this very complicated sign language. I thought it was so interesting. I really liked it. I already bought the second one. I can't wait to read it. This is one of the series I really need to finish in 2026, so hold me accountable, y'all. Next, I read Tripping Arcadia by Kit Mayquist. This is an adult horror. It's kind of marketed as a gothic novel. This one takes place with a girl who had to quit medical school because her dad was deep in debt after like an injury and her family needed her home. She starts working for this really rich Bostonian family, but they're really weird and the son is really sick all the time, and she's assisting the family doctor, but then she starts assisting with these parties where they're like giving people drugs. It's basically her and the doctor triaging people and making sure they stay high safely, but also the guy who hired her is the guy who's responsible for her dad and their whole family being fucked over. But she starts to get a big crush on his daughter too. I enjoyed this one. It wasn't my favorite thriller or horror of the year by any means at all, but I still had a really good time, and I thought some things were very interesting. If you like Aqua Tofana, I think you would like this. Next, I read Someone You Can Build a Nest In by John Wiswell for my book club. This one was so good. So it's a horror fantasy. It's for adults, and it follows the shapeshifter Sheshin, who is fallen in love with this human girl named Homily, but Homily's whole family thinks that Sheshin cursed their family, and it's really disgusting because she shapeshifts in like a gross way. Very interesting. One of my favorite reads of the year by far, so thank you Piper from my book club because this was so good. Next, I read Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. This is a YA romance that is historical. Also, it takes place during the Red Scare of the 50s, and our main character is a Chinese femme girl who falls in love with a butch girl. It's really cute. It's really well written. My only complaint is that the lavender scare wasn't brought up at all because it was the same exact time period and gays and lesbians were being fired from the federal government. So I think that that could have really helped this story just a little bit, but I understand it didn't take place in DC, so it probably wasn't quite as prevalent as the Red Scare in California, but still I think it could have been good to just mention it. I really loved this book though. I like Melinda Lowe a lot. Next, I read A Scatter of Light by Melinda Lowe. This is kind of a companion book to Last Night at the Telegraph Club, and this one also took place in 2013, the year I came out. I didn't like this one very much. This is my worst rated Melinda Lowe, and it makes me so sad to say. I still gave it like a 3.5, but I've been reading Melinda Lowe since the 2010s. I read Ash, and it was the second ever queer book I had read about women, and I love it. I think it's a great book. This one has a large cheating storyline, and that's something that just did not sit right with me. I really didn't enjoy that, and then it felt like at the end all of the cheating had kind of been for nothing. I understand that it's like a coming of age book, but I didn't like watching this specific person come of age, I suppose. I don't think it's poorly written. I think it's just not for me. Next, I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This was my first V.E. Schwab book. I didn't like it. It's anyway, it's an adult historical magical realism thing. I felt like because it's marketed as sapphic, but nothing sapphic really happens, not only is that kind of disappointing, but because I'm a lesbian and I have no interest in these men that she's into, I'm just noticing all of the plot holes, all of the egregious plot holes that drive me bonkers. And some of the repetition kind of got on my nerves too. I gave this about like a 3-star. Wasn't really for me either. It wasn't terrible, but I was actively bored and regretting my decisions because it's like a 500-page book. Next, I read She Is a Haunting by Trong Tan Tran. This is a YA horror book. I really liked this one. I feel like it dealt a lot with colonization, specifically the French colonization of Vietnam. And it was also like, it wasn't scary for sure, but it was disgusting. There's just some imagery in here that was really disgusting that I really enjoyed. And quite honestly, I really liked it. I'm excited to read more from her. I didn't think it was like perfect, but I had a good time. Next, I read The Ones We Burn by Rebecca Mix. I did know that this one was problematic, but I bought it secondhand, okay? So, where to begin with this one? This is a YA fantasy. This one has some serious problems and I think needed like 25 sensitivity readers, quite honestly. I also was not really a big fan of puberty/periods kind of being associated with uncontrollable aggression and violence. I kind of felt some type of way about that. I didn't really like it. The main problem I would say is that the king and his sister, the princess, and their friend, they're all people of color and our main girl isn't. And I think the author thought that she was writing them to be good people who were just kind of put in a bad situation. However, they were kind of still responsible for all the oppression of the main character's people who are witches, and they hadn't really done anything about it. I know that they're young and I know that there's nuance, but I do think it's kind of weird when your main character is white and all of who she views as antagonists for a good portion of the book are not white. it felt weird. The whole thing felt weird, and I also don't think it was particularly well written. I think the cover art is beautiful, but it wasn't very well written. I wouldn't recommend this. And last for July, I read I Kissed Shara Wheeler by Casey McQuiston. This is a contemporary YA romance. This is my first Casey McQuiston book, and I could not put this one down. I thought that this one was fantastic. I think it would make a great rom-com. I had a really good time with it. Basically, the valedictorian Shara Wheeler goes missing, and she has left these letters to her academic rival, her boyfriend, and her childhood best friend. I really liked this book. I really did. I thought it was really fun, and I know that Casey McQuiston is kind of like a very polarizing person. I've heard a lot of people say One Last Stop is racist. I haven't read that one yet. I believe you when you say that. I also know some people have some problems with Red, White, Royal Blue. I haven't read that one either. So just this one, I really liked it. I also thrifted it anyway. I thrift most of my books, so it's whatever. But yeah, I actually really enjoyed this. So first in August was Never Ever Getting Back Together by Sophie Gonzalez. This is a YA contemporary that is basically on a show that's like The Bachelor, and it's a bunch of his ex-girlfriends coming to compete for a chance with him, but one of them wants revenge because he was cheating with the other girl, but they fall in love. I thought that this was a fun book. I don't think it's like the best YA I've ever read, but I think this one would make a really fun rom-com also. Like, I had a good time while reading it, so I would recommend it. The main characters are both bisexual. It was very good, and you might like the rep. I had a good time. Next, I read Claimed by Her Bear by Ariel Marie. This was a novella, and it's the second in the Montana Grizzlies series. I made a whole rant review that none of you watch, so get over there and watch it. It's not long. I just feel like it wasn't committed to the bit. You know what I mean? Like, I felt like it wasn't committed to being bear shifter smut because the bear and the girl felt very separate, and I'm like, no. Why would you want her to just be able to turn into a bear if that's not what you're actually into? I don't really get that. It wasn't for me for multiple reasons, but it wasn't the worst thing I've read this year, so, you know. Next, I read I Can't Think Straight by Shamim Sarif. This is a movie. It's one of my favorite movies ever, and I decided to read it just because I wanted a nice, easy read. This is when my dog was in the emergency room, and it's very much like shot for shot exactly like the movie, so I really enjoyed it. I had a really good time. I think a lot of people would have a good time, and it's a very short read. It's really cute. It's an adult romance about two women who are Middle Eastern. Well, yeah, one of them is Palestinian and one of them is Indian, so South Asian. Sorry, but they both live in Britain and were educated in Britain. So a lot of it takes place in Britain also. This is such a fun book, but I highly suggest you watch the movie too because it's so good. It's so underrated. Also, guys, I have a new chair coming in next week. I'm so excited to start filming on it. I have a bunch of ideas for videos, so I'm very excited. It's gonna be a cozier chair than this chair. I know we're used to this chair. This chair's not very comfortable to sit in. It's cute, but not comfy. Next, I read, this one has a long title, so I'm just gonna read it. Love and Resistance, Out of the Closet into the Stonewall Era. This includes photographs by Kay Tobin Hewson and Diana Davies, and this is from the New York Public Library's archives. So this doesn't have a lot to read overall. Well, some pages it's just all words, but there's a lot of photographs. And I read this again while my dog had just come back from being in the ER. She's always weird after being put under for anything. So I just read this entire thing to her and showed her the pictures, and she really loved this. And so did I, because it made her calm, and I also got to see pictures of our queer elders, you know? She especially loved this picture of Marsha P. Johnson, and I liked it too, so. It's a really nice quick read if you just want to learn some more about like the photography from, you know, the Stonewall era. I really liked it. It's very shiny. It was a quick read. Highly recommend. Next, with my Sapphic book club, I read Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This is an adult historical kind of fantasy. It's about vampires. The tagline is toxic lesbian vampires. It follows 3 different lesbian vampires through their turning and their own journeys and stuff. I really liked this book. I gave it like a 4.25. I had a really good time. I've seen a lot of people complain that there wasn't a lot of character development. I will agree. I don't think there's a lot of character development. However, that didn't really bother me because I didn't really really feel like any of them needed that much character development. I feel like sometimes people's, how do I put this? The things that kind of make people fucked up sometimes are actually their demise, and they don't necessarily get any better or learn anything from it. And I think it's fine that sometimes we have a book like that. That's just my personal opinion, but I love this way more than The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. This restored some faith I have for V. Schwab, honestly. Next, I read The Air You Breathe by Frances de Pont-Pible. This I found at a thrift store just willy-nilly. I was like, this looks gay, and I was right, it is. So this is a historical, I wouldn't say romance, it's more like literary. However, these two girls meet when they're pretty young in Brazil, and they become quickly obsessed with each other, and then one of them ends up being a singer and the other one ends up writing the music for the other one. And there's a very tense, like, will they, won't they situation going on. And also they go to Hollywood at one point, but it's like mid 1900s, I think. It's not great, and they're super racist to Grassa. And honestly, I feel like this book is what The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo wishes it was. That book wishes it was this book, because this book will devastate you. The sheer amount of pining in this book was so upsetting. And if you want a tragic ending too, just to spoil, this is very tragic. This is tragic. Nobody wins. But I didn't feel like offended by it in the same way, because I understood why some of the characters died in the ways that they did, and I enjoyed the book, and I didn't feel like it was because they were queer. You know what I mean? I loved this book. This, again, if you want something like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, but you want something that actually deals with the racism of old-timey Hollywood, this one is the one. Okay. Next, I read Queen Takes Rose by Katie Robert. This is an adult romance. I would also say it's a little bit erotica. There's a lot of smut in here. This was definitely a Sleeping Beauty retelling, but only if you squint. This book has Kingdom Hearts rules, and it doesn't make any sense, but the sex scenes are some of the best I've ever read in a book ever. If you want my full thoughts, you should check out my rant review, because it's kind of a wild ride, but it's still a really fun book. However, I didn't care about the characters. I didn't understand the world building in the slightest. So I gave it about like a 3, I think. Could be better, could be worse. And lastly, for August, I read The Lotus Empire by Tasha Suri. This is the 3rd book in the Burning Kingdoms trilogy, and this one was devastating, and I was like, why would you write this? This one has such a bittersweet ending between them, and they've already had so much going on. I think this and the 2nd book are my favorites in the series. I really loved it, and I'm excited to read more by Tasha Suri, quite honestly, because I felt like this was such a rich, interesting fantasy with really cool religions and like cultural elements that just made sense, because Tasha Suri actually took the time to build up the world and also make the politics make sense and make everything about what's going on make sense. So I deeply enjoyed this book. I would highly recommend this series. Big fan. Okay, so for September with my book club, I read The Girls I've Been by Tess Sharp. This is a YA contemporary. I feel like it's almost a thriller, but it's not quite. It's more like an action-y kind of book. So basically the main character is the daughter of a con woman, and she ends up in this bank robbery, and she's pretty much trying to bullshit her way out of it. It's very interesting, and I'm super excited to read the 2nd one. That's on my TBR for 2026. Really want to finish this series. I had a good time. I do think some of it was a little cringy. I think I liked it a lot better than a lot of my book club members do, but I tend to like YA more than they do also. However, I think that it dealt with some really heavy topics such as sexual assault very well, and it also has endometriosis queer rep, which you almost never see. I'm so excited for that, because I had stage 4. I had to have a total hysterectomy. I ended up also having PCOS, you know, that whole thing. So it's really nice to see some rep in a YA book. It's nice. Next, I read Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. This is an adult contemporary romance, and basically after our main character gets her PhD in astronomy, she goes to celebrate in Las Vegas, and then she drunk marries this girl, and they start communicating, and it's so interesting. It felt very literary to me, but this book had me sobbing, because as someone who crashed and burned after college, I really related to this, and I really related to seeing someone struggle so much with some barriers, even though she has more than me because she's a black lesbian, but it still felt relatable, you know what I mean? And it doesn't have to be relatable to me, but it just was, you know what I mean? Not every book has to be relatable. That's not what I'm saying at all. I just meant that this book was like very personal to me. And honestly, I don't know who I could recommend this book to, even though I gave it a 5, because it was so deeply emotionally upsetting to me. I loved it, but it was so deeply emotionally upsetting. Highly recommend, but go in just knowing that. Also, I want her to write another book so bad. This was her debut, and she's come out with nothing. So I'm like, girl, get back into writing, because holy shit. I also just felt like that author really loved writing, and you could tell, and sometimes I don't feel that way, but I really did feel that way with her, and I really enjoyed it. Next, I read Cursed Slumber by Luna Lockhart. This was a dark fantasy romance. I did a whole rant review about this one. Go check that one out. This one was just awful, and it was simile hell, and it says that there's CNC, but there was no CNC. It was all just assault. So I didn't have a good time, but I did have a good time ranting about it, and thankfully it was a novella, so I wasn't torturing myself forever. Next, I read A Ballad for Slayers and Monsters by Rita A. Rubin. This is an adult fantasy. I liked this book a lot. First of all, I've shown people the cover, but like I think people don't understand how beautiful this book is. And compared to like the original cover, I think that this is an insane upgrade. And there's this cute little thing of them inside. It's really nice. I love having a butch main character in a fantasy. I loved that there were no men POVs, and men had very little to do with any of this. It wasn't perfect. I think it kind of lagged in some areas. I think it needed some tweaks with pacing, and I honestly think some of the things that they went through, we could have stretched this out into a couple more books and it would have been better. However, I still had a really good time, and it's so pretty to look at. I mean, how can you be upset about that butch on that cover? You can't, okay? Next, I read Off With Her Head by Dana Leanne. It was supposed to be a dark fantasy romance retelling of like Alice in Wonderland, specifically the Queen of Hearts. Alice doesn't actually ever show up. I did a rant review on this one too. Please click on that if you want more info on that. But this one was just like weird, and all the dark elements fell off really fast. It was really boring overall, and a lot of it felt very repetitive. There was a lot of telling, not showing. Not for me. Certainly not for me. Next, I read What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This is one of the only non-sapphic books. It follows a non-binary character through a retelling of Edgar Allan Poe's Fall of the House of Usher. I actually really liked it. I thought it was disgusting. It's a novella, so it's really quick. There's a couple more. I might end up reading them. I haven't decided yet. I didn't find it scary, and if you do know a lot about Edgar Allan Poe, it is quite predictable. However, I still had a good time. Next, I read The Black Queen by Jumana Emil, and this is a YA. This says mystery. I feel like it's like a mystery thriller, and it's the first ever Black homecoming queen is murdered pretty much right after being coronated, and it's a very racist town, and they think that this girl Tinsley, who is a white girl who had said she wanted Nova dead because she felt entitled to the crown because her family always gets it. They thought she did it, but it ends up being the best friend and that girl trying to team up to figure out who actually did it. This book had me guessing. I'm not great at guessing thriller twists, but I still really loved this one. I thought it was so good, and I had a really great time. I have another book by this author. I'm very excited to read it. I felt like the racism elements were done really well because it was a very nuanced take on all of it, and I really liked that, and I thought it was very good. Next, I read The Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling. This is my favorite read of the year. It is a adult horror fantasy that takes place in a medieval castle where they have been under siege for such a long time that they're running out of food, and there's also these like really crazy magical elements. It seems like their gods come to life to come help them, and also there's spelunking, which is one of my greatest fears. This was my favorite book of the whole year. I could not put this book down. I could not stop thinking about this book. I adored this book. Takes the cake for me. It's the best book of the year for me. And the last book I read in September was My Carmilla, a Sapphic Vampire Romance by Anita Zara. It is an indie Carmilla retelling novella. I felt like this was the weakest Carmilla retelling I've ever read. I felt like it really didn't do anything that Carmilla is trying to do, and it made like modern day homophobia and misogyny the villains, even though it takes place in the exact same time period as the original Carmilla, which was just coming off of kind of the era of romantic friendship. So it's kind of odd that they decided to do it that way. However, it wasn't for me. It felt like, what if we redid Carmilla, but we put a lot of sex in it? Not for me, no thanks. Starting off strong with October though, we have Hungerstone by Kat Dunn, which is another Carmilla retelling. In this, Laura is replaced by Lenore, who is this British woman from a noble family, but her parents died and she married this really rich guy who wants to kind of climb upwards. And Carmilla gets to their house kind of in the same exact way in the original Carmilla, a carriage crash, and then slowly everything starts to get a little bit crazy. I loved this because I felt like it built upon the original themes of Victorian sexual repression while also adding misogyny as partially the villain, but in a very creative and interesting way, and not painting the original men, who were well-meaning but useless in the original, as terrible people. I really enjoyed this book. It was so fun. Next, I read Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. This is a adult science fiction horror, and it has to do with mermaids slash sirens. This book was good-ish. I give it a 4. However, a lot of it is quite boring and a lot of it is very sciencey, and it takes a long time for a lot of the characters to start dying. However, there is one scene with a submersible that made me want to die, because that's one of my other fears. No, my fear isn't like enclosed spaces. I think some people think it is. It's not. It's like dying in a really stupid, needless way. Doing something you were never meant to be doing, in my opinion. I had a good time, but it's definitely not my favorite. You know, I don't know if I'd ever reread it. Next, I read Ordinary Love by Marie Rutkowski. This is an adult lit fic. This was my pick for book club. I adore Marie Rutkowski. I read The Midnight Lion, The Hollow Heart, which are her YA duology, that's fantasy, and they were fantastic. They were so upsetting. This one is great. This one has butch rep, and this one does have a romance in it for sure. However, there's also a lot of talk about abuse, like domestic abuse and domestic violence. So I just want to warn you guys, because I feel like I wasn't expecting it when I started reading it. So I just want to warn you guys. However, Marie Rutkowski has done it again. She will continue to do it again for me. I adore her. Amazing book. Next, I read Collateral Damage by Shossi. I have a 2-part rant review on this one. This is an erotic thriller, is how she markets it. It is almost 600 pages of the most edgiest edgelord shit you have ever seen in your life. Did I have a good time? Kind of. Was it almost unreadable in most places? Yes. Please go check out those rant reviews. I worked very hard on them, but honestly, I gave it like a 3, and that was mostly for enjoyment and vibe, not like the actual writing, to be perfectly real with you. Next, I read Captive in the Underworld by Leanne Yutan. This is a dark romance. It's also fantasy, and it revolves around Greek gods, and this is the best dark romance I've read so far. I have a rare review on that one too. Please go check it out. I worked hard on that one too. This one is less offensive to me because it's Greek gods doing Greek god things, and I also think Leanne Yutan did a very good job with the trigger warnings specifically. However, I would say it wouldn't be for everyone. I still only give it a 4. I'm still on my hunt for my first ever 5-star dark romance. I think I could like it, and I think people think that I don't. But the thing is that I love horror, I love romance. I'm not against horrifying things being in books. I'm against poorly written books. So like, I don't know. I'm just like, this could be better. Next, I read Extasia by Claire Legrand. This is a YA horror. I had a really good time with this because I felt like it dealt a lot with religious indoctrination and misogyny. Men are literally the problem, and the only complaint I have is that one character dies and we don't really go into how that affects her girlfriend who's still alive. We like kind of barely gloss over it, and that's something that I just feel is a missed opportunity in an almost 500-page book. That being said, I had a very good time. I really enjoyed it. Goodbye. Next, I read Where Darkness Blooms by Andrea Hannah, I don't know. And this was also a YA horror. Now, surprisingly, this one is very similar to the other one that I just said, which has, you know, like women going missing, misogyny, and men are always the problem. There's like a bigger cast of girls. I felt like it was very similar, but it is much shorter. I feel like it handles a lot of the same topics, and I didn't pick them together on purpose, but I thought they were both very well done. I enjoyed both. Next, I read Where Sleeping Girls Lie by Farida Abike Ayamide, and this is a YA thriller slash mystery, and it takes place in a boarding school. I loved this one. This one also has to deal with violence against women, misogyny, and men always being the literal problem, and how institutions protect men because it also helps protect themselves, and there's a lot of like institutionalized misogyny in this one. I loved this one, and I didn't really know where it was going for a lot of it, but I'm really glad I read it. I had a really good time. Highly recommend this one. Next, I read Raising the Horseman by Serena Valentino. This is a YA horror. I would say the horror is non-existent. So this is a Sleepy Hollow Headless Horseman retelling, but make it sapphic and owned by Disney. Yeah, little crazy. Wasn't expecting that. I think that a lot of the things that bothered me is that there was supposed to be epistolary from the older Katrina's point of view, but it wasn't, because we got literally the thoughts and feelings of other characters. So that's not what an epistolary is. It's not through like letters or diary then. It's just you recounting it in like third person or whatever. I can't remember if it was third or first person, but I wasn't into it. I wasn't that into it. I honestly feel like if this had been marketed as middle grade, would have been better. I think this is definitely more middle grade for sure. I gave this like a 3.5. Not amazing. Next, I read with my book club Women by Chloe Caldwell. This is a literary novella. I hated this book. This book was awful. The whole plot is cheating. Justice for the girlfriend, who we never find out she learns that her girlfriend of 10 years has been cheating. That's literally horrifying to me, and I can't support these characters, and I don't understand why they did all of this dumb shit. It's just not for me. It's not the kind of book I like. That's all. Last, for October, I read The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. This is a YA fantasy horror. This one was so good, and I didn't really like her other book, The House of Hollow, so I was very nervous. However, this one is so interesting. There's multiple queer characters. There's a witch and a billionaire's daughter, and this girl desperate to do necromancy to resurrect her dead sister. There's a huge mystery. This is so good. I couldn't put it down. I love necromancy also. Like, it's so fun. And I feel like there were some really good quotes in here that made me feel like it really understood the lesbian experience, specifically with the billionaire's daughter, Jude. I highly recommend this book. I know a lot of people don't love YA, but this is a really good YA. You should try it. Now we're on to November, my birthday month. Woohoo! I started November off with The Warden by Danielle M. Ford. This is the first in a trilogy. This is about a necromancer who has graduated from school, and she is now the warden of this very, very rural town, and she's not loving every minute of it. I will say there hasn't been a lot of necromancy in the first book, and it definitely feels like cozy fantasy, more in line with like You Can't Spell Treason Without Tea or Legends and Lattes. That doesn't mean I didn't have a damn good time, and I'm excited to read the next ones. The only complaint I have, other than like sometimes it's a little boring, is that this cover is not as cute as the other ones, and this is just, it's gonna mismatch too, because there's no like triple covers in this style. It's all the new one, and that makes me so angry. Don't do that to people. Next, I read Cursed by Malignant Magic by Genesis St. Clair. This was my most popular rate review. Thank you guys so much. It is a romantasy, and I hated everything about this one. You should go watch that rate review because I had so much fun. I literally loathed that book. Like, I could not wait to tear it apart because I was so angry. I think the characters are terribly written. I think the world is terribly written. I think that it's ridiculous. Literally ridiculous. 1 out of 5 would not recommend, but please maybe think about checking out that video. Next, I read The Antlered King by Marianne Gordon. This is the second in the Raven's Trade duology. The first one is called The Gilded Crown. This one is literally insane because necromancy takes like a huge cost to the person who does it, and not everyone can do it. You literally have to make deals with death. So interesting. And then the other love interest is a princess who is not afraid to just die because she knows that Helivir will bring her back to life. And it gets so messy in this book specifically, and so dark. This book had me sobbing from 2 to 4:30 a.m. on my birthday. I cannot recommend this series enough. No one ever talks to me about them. I need someone to talk to about this specific series. People freaking get on reading these because they're amazing. Next, I read The Difference Between You and Me by Madeline George. This was back in 2012, a contemporary YA book. It says romance. I don't agree with that because the criteria for romance is that you have to end up together and be happy, and that's not what happens here. So this book was really depressing because like there was no character growth. Neither of the girls, who were very different from each other, actually had any actual character growth, and it was extremely infuriating. Their cheating was also a huge portion of this storyline too, so it really wasn't for me. I really wanted to like a book that had a butch lead for a YA contemporary. However, I just feel like it's not that well written. I feel like it's not a great choice. And I actually wanted to like it because I have been waiting for so long to read this. It's been on my TBR since probably 2013, and this copy is signed. I accidentally got a signed copy on Thrift Books, but this book just isn't it. So like, it's gonna be going back to Thrift Books. It was very disappointing. Next, I read Tangled Encounters by Madison Nicole. This is an adult romance. I have a full rant review on that if you are interested. I liked this okay, but there were just some things that gave me the major ick, specifically like one sex scene and like a couple of things, but sometimes it's personal personal preference. I also just don't like third act breakups, so that's another reason why I didn't love that. However, I still gave it almost a 4. So I am excited to try and read more from that series because I thought it was a fun idea. It just, like, that first book is like some of it's a big no from me. Next, I read with my book club The Last Bookstore on Earth by Lily Braun Arnold. This is a YA dystopian / science fiction where basically, well, it's not dystopian, I guess, but it feels almost, I don't know. There's this horrifying, like, acid rain that happens that kills, like, a ton of people and wrecks up a ton of buildings, and this teenage girl has been holding up in the bookshop where she worked before she was supposed to leave for college. And then a bunch of shit ensues. However, I think there's basically no character development. It's the most millennial cringe book you'll ever read, even though the author is Gen Z and still in college. There's one really good scene where it's her, spoilers, it's her sister's face and, like, skin melting off her bones from the rain. And I loved that scene and I bumped it up a star for that, so it's 2 stars. However, one more person melts near the end and we don't even get to see it. So rude. Like, that was my favorite part of the book and you're just gonna cut that out? That's really rude. The descriptions were just disgusting, and I think she might want to veer into horror, like specifically body horror instead. I think she could do a really good job if she did that. I really want her to do that. Next, I read Bewitched by Paige Mackenzie and Nancy Olin. This is a YA fantasy, like, but it's more like an urban fantasy. Basically, being a witch is illegal and there are 2 rival covens that end up having to come together to fight off this, like, anti-magic, anti-witch group and someone who's been killing witches specifically. I liked this book, however, I do agree with some other reviews that say some of the voices are very hard to differentiate. My favorite character is the evil coven leader, Div, because you always know it's her. She always knows what's up. She says crazy, awful things, and she does awful things, but you kind of understand why she does them when you're in her head. And I adore her, and she carries a boa as her familiar like she's Britney Spears. Say no more. So I'm very excited for the next book. My main complaint is there's not enough Div, and Div is on the cover of the next one, so please give me more Div. Please and thanks. Last for November was Not Good for Maidens by Tori Bovalino. This is a YA horror fantasy. I think the horror isn't that horrifying, but I'm very desensitized. I've said this before. I watch horror movies constantly, so it really doesn't bother me. However, I do understand why it would bother some people. This book is gross at a lot of times, and I did really still enjoy it. I had a really good time, and I really did like how it was entrenched in, like, English fae lore, and I thought that that was a fun and interesting kind of horror story to do. I would definitely recommend this one. Here we come to the Christmas meltdown. Oh boy, but we're almost there. So December. The first book I read was Unthaw My Heart by Harmony Noble, which is actually 2 authors. I did a whole rant review on this one. They lied and said that it was a woman and a cis woman and a trans woman romance, and it's not. It's a cis woman and a trans man, which would be fine if you hadn't lied to me and mismarketed the entire thing. I felt like it was overall pretty boring and not very well written. I felt like it really didn't understand transness, even though they insisted on writing a trans character, and that kind of made me feel weird. I don't know. Go watch that rant review. I have much more to say. I hope you'll enjoy it. After that, I read I'll Get Back to You by Becca Grishchow. This was a contemporary Christmas romance. I actually really liked this one. I read this one on the plane and I thought it was cute. I loved the fake dating and the trying to get a better grade from your professor who happens to be this girl you knew from high school's mom. I really liked all of that. I felt like there were also some really good conversations about, like, friendships and kind of being too enmeshed with people, you know? I really enjoyed that from this book, and I honestly really had a good time. I gave it a 4.5. There ended up being a couple 5s for December, but I really was starting to think there wasn't gonna be any. For real. Next, I read The Holiday Trap by Rome Parrish, where it's a lesbian and a gay guy switch houses. She's in Maine on a small island and he's in New Orleans, Louisiana. And they switch for reasons that kind of do make sense, and I kind of enjoyed that. There were just some things in the writing that I didn't particularly enjoy. Felt like it was trying to be, like, too much like a rom-com movie in certain instances. I will also say I didn't really like the sapphic romance as much as I liked the Achillean romance, which made me kind of sad. I felt like the Achillean romance was allowed to just kind of play itself out before they started, like, banging everywhere, and I feel like sapphic romance wasn't allowed to do that. And I don't really like when that happens personally, but that's a personal preference. I gave it about a 3. It was fine. Also, there were some stupid things, like if you follow my PageBound, which if you don't, you should, there was a section where he said that his Great Dane went on the plane with him, but it had to sit in his lap the whole time because he was afraid. So if your pet is over a certain weight and it's not a service animal, it has to go in the cargo area. So that just drove me crazy for almost the rest of the time. I know that's such a stupid nitpick, but it made me angry. Next was my book club pick, because I had heard terrible things about this book and I didn't want to suffer alone. Make the Season Bright by Ashley Herring Blake. It's a contemporary Christmassy romance. We all hated this book. It was a second chance romance, except one of them had left the other one at the altar, and that's absolutely, you could never come back from that for me. Like, I could not believe that they got back together. I felt like Brighton, the one who did the leaving, was insufferable. Couldn't stand her. And I feel like it was everyone gaslighting Charlotte, aka Lola, the other girl, the entire time. Trying to be like, why aren't you into this? And I'm like, she shouldn't be. Whatever. Next, I read Little Miss Santa Claus by Becca Westrup. It was a contemporary kind of fantasy monster romance novella where the monster is Santa and Krampus at the same time. I had the same issue with this as I had with Claimed by Her Bear. I want you to commit to the bit, and they didn't. They didn't commit to the bit, in my opinion. I think this one tried harder than Claimed by Her Bear, which is why I gave it a higher rating, about a 3. However, not freaky enough for me. However, there were amazing discussions about divorce, which was very interesting. I wasn't expecting that in there, but yeah. Anyway, I read mostly ebooks for December, just so you know, sorry. Next, I read Carol, otherwise known as The Price of Salt by Patricia Highsmith. This is technically considered a classic. It's also a romance. I would say it's very literary as well. I loved it. I loved it. I had such a good time. It was written so well, in such an interesting way, and I loved it even more than I liked the movie. I will say it's important to note that Patricia Highsmith was a terrible person. She was a misogynist. She was racist. She was not a good person in the slightest. However, this book is a banger and she is dead. So it's not like she got any of my money. However, I highly recommend this. It's a little bit Christmassy because it starts around Christmas. I really enjoyed this. However, I just want to go back to the 50s where you could get a part-time job at a department store for the holidays and you could just live off of that. Can't now. God damn. Next, I read Lesbian Boss by Kitty Jones. I just did a rant review about this novella. I hated it. It's a little romance. I would also say it's kind of erotica, but it's not really. The sex wasn't good. There were some things in there that just give me personally the ick. It doesn't mean that everyone will hate it, but I feel like it's done to death and it's gross. And I also really hate office sex. I can't do it. And also, like, I feel like there's something so specific about the power imbalance that is not really properly addressed that really bothers me. But that's, again, just personal preferences. I know everyone has different fantasies and wants to experience different things. I just didn't like it, and that's okay. Next, I read Kiss Her Once for Me by Allison Cochran. This is a contemporary romance and, again, Christmassy, and this has a fake relationship, but with the girl she was into and she like fell in love with her after one day, and then the next Christmas she's pretending to be that girl's brother's fiance, but she didn't know they were related, and it's for money. So this one was like,
wait, is this fucking play about us?
So for me, I have 2 animation degrees. I crashed and burned after college the first time. This felt really relatable. I was like, damn, if only a hot, sexy butch who I fell in love with one Christmas ago would come and rescue me, you know? I think that this one would be a great rom-com, but I would have a very hard time casting the butch because that butch is so fine. I think you would have to go with someone unknown. I don't think there's anyone I can think of who could do it justice right now. And the last book I read, unless I finish Nona tonight, I guess, which I won't, is How to Excavate a Heart by Jake Maya Arlo. This is a Jewish holiday romance, and it's YA technically, and it's not even really Hanukkah, it's more towards Christmas, but one of them has just had the main character, who is Butch, which is amazing, just got her heart broken her first year of college, and she's going to DC because she got this internship for this paleoichthyology, I think it's paleoichthyology, something like that. It's like paleontology but for ancient fish, right? And she meets this girl who her mom hit with her car, and then they have a romance, and I thought it was really good. I also thought it had discussions of sexual assault that were quite good. Really enjoyed it. So I did get a couple of 5s. The last 3 for December were 5s, thank God, because I was suffering for a hot minute. All right, let's do some quick reading stats for funsies. So something I'm really proud of myself is my current streak is reading 203 days in a row. I'm so proud of myself for that. I was struggling at the beginning of the year a lot, and I really got it all figured out by, I would say, middle of the year. So I'm really proud of myself for working really hard at that. I read 104 books and 35,444 pages. The average time to finish was 6 days, but it's important to remember that a lot of that is because of my book club books, which take several weeks for us to do. But the rest of them, I do about 2 books a week at least, so it's probably not actually that long. I mostly read page number of books between 300 and 499, but I did step my toe in the other arenas. I mostly read fiction, 93%, and then 7% nonfiction, but I'm proud that I have been trying to read more nonfiction. Good for me. And my average rating for these books, I didn't rate the Rory Power book though, to be fair, for the year is 3.86. So I do think I've been doing better at being critical because for a while, for the first couple of years where I wasn't really doing booktube or booktok at all, but I was reading, I was not as critical. I was like, yay, lesbians are in it. And now I'm like, no, you know, I have tastes, I have needs, I have things I care about. So I'm glad I figured that all out for myself. I'm super proud for myself, and for next year I want to do 120 books. Now, some of those are going to be graphic novels and novellas and such. I have some really big, thick books to read for like fantasy series that I want to finish up. I have a lot of series I gotta finish, unfortunately for me. What did you guys read this year? What was your favorite book? What was your least favorite book? Please tell me in the comments. Leave little book emojis or something if you made it this far. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. It really helps the channel. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!